There's a quote by Anne-Marie Willis I read in one of my classes. It says, "We design our world while our world acts back on us and designs us. While we have created the current system of our demise, we can design an alternative, one with sustainability, equity, climate resilience, and justice at the forefront." The US is not only complicit in the genocide and in upholding Israel's occupation and apartheid, it's a part of it. The weapons being used are US weapons. The plane being used are US planes. The complete carte blanche is given by the US, and so Israel can continue its crimes with impunity because it has US backing. There's so many resolutions over the past over years that try to kind of make a bit of progress in terms of giving Palestinians their right or upholding international law with Palestinian territories, and it's always mainly the US that's in the way. So being here is there's a huge role and responsibility that people have to kind of speak out against that. And I'm Lebanese, and Lebanese American, I have US citizenship. I feel, when I'm working here, my taxes will be going to wars in the region where I'm from. And that's something that I'm not okay with, and a lot of people are not okay with. And our education shouldn't, we're trying to go and get an education so we can, go in these different careers, try and make a difference, depending on what you want to do. But the fact that our education is coming at the cost of people's lives, not only in Palestine, but in just wars generally, conflicts generally, is not acceptable. And I say not just Palestine because we actually don't know where our money is going, where the investment, the endowment of the school, where it's going, because it's not transparent. And that was one of the demands that students had at Columbia and at more than 100 campuses around the US.
I know you don't want to make it about yourself. You want to talk about the cause and the issue. But I think a lot of people would be interested in the events leading to your arrest. What actually happened?
Yeah. So in Colombia, there's two main groups that have been coordinating these efforts before. Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace. And in last semester, I'm not sure which month, the school shut them down. So essentially, we went to a protest. It was honestly such a beautiful protest. This student from the West Bank who had been shot in the leg when he was in 13 or 14 was talking about his experience. And there were counter protesters called Students Stand with Israel who were saying no ceasefire, return the hostages, etc. When you say no ceasefire, you're essentially saying continue the genocide. That's a genocidal statement. And he was like, we want justice for everybody. We want you to join us in our call for justice. And, it was just such a moving moment of compassion and empathy. And then the next day, those two groups were shut down. So then there was this group called the Columbia University Apartheid Divest. It's a student group of more than 100 other student groups, it's a coalition. And they kind of took over and trying to create movements with divesting specific schools, having specific schools have votes to divest financially from any company supporting or benefiting off of Israeli occupation and apartheid. So I had been a student protester in these groups. I hadn't been in the groups. I had been protesting at these protests. So they were shut down on Wednesday, April 16, I think it was, which was the same day of the President Minouche Shafiq's hearing in DC. Students had created this encampment at 4 a.m. They set up tents. And when I woke up, I heard about it. And I was honestly so amazed by their strategy and their kind of mobilization to do this. So I decided to join them. So that morning I went and joined them. And initially we were protesting around the encampment. So people were sleeping at the encampment, which is this green lawn. And then students around 200 to 300 at times were walking and protesting around them to kind of create this protective barrier. And then at some point I decided to join the actual encampment. So sleep in tents. That night, and assuming it would last long, assuming it would be 1 or 2 weeks. I remember I ordered a tent and a sleeping bag. because it was really cold.
Tell
And
me you were arrested before you
I received it the day I got home from the police. Yeah. So the next day is when the police were called. There's a letter you can find that the president had written saying like this is not a safe encampment. They're it's non-peaceful and they pose a threat to other students, etc. Check the exact thing. I'm not sure with the
yeah
words, but so then the police showed up around 2 and then we were arrested. We had been in a circle. Um, I guess actually before we were arrested, it was a bit strategic in terms of who was arrested. There's different zones: red zone, pink zone, yellow, green of support. And red zone were people who were like, okay, if the police is called, which it wasn't guaranteed, we like agree to be arrested. And the logic in that is the more people who are in the red zone, the more protected everybody is. But there's certain people who can't be in the red zone for different reasons, whether it's citizenship reasons, financial aid, like different things that they can't afford to be in the red zone. So they're in the pink zone. So they still can camp, but when the police is called, they tell them, okay, you can like leave now so you avoid arrest. I was in the red zone. So we like knew the police was coming, and then within 10 minutes they showed up. Um, at least when I had heard, it was within 10 minutes of them showing up. And then we were in a circle, kind of like arm in arm, sitting in a circle, singing and chanting. And then everybody, there's maybe 500 people around us, and everybody is chanting. And those people were called to show up at 12. And within 30 minutes, 500 people arrived. Like it was such a moving moment of solidarity. And everybody in the circle is crying because it
yeah
just like, it was so moving. Really, it was not like fear of getting arrested. It was just such a intense, like it's hard to describe. It was such an intense emotional moment of community and solidarity. And, you know,
this is
with something.
before you got arrested, right?
This is before we got arrested,
Yeah.
when the police came into the green area,
Okay.
the encampment area. And then we got arrested,
Yeah.
and we were zip tied and taken on
Did
buses.
you kind of expect it, Tamara?
So in the first encampment, when we got arrested and the police were called in, they were told that it was a violent and non-peaceful protest, but the police later released a statement that they didn't have any evidence that it was non-peaceful. And for the police to do that, like they didn't need to do that, but for them to do that shows that it really was a breach of freedom of speech to go to escalate the situation to the extent of calling the police on your own students. Um, and so that's just the police's statement saying there was no evidence of aggression and it was a peaceful protest is a symbolic move that the administration had grossly overreacted. I thought if the police was called, we would at least last a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was gonna happen the next day,
Yeah. I
which
see.
is why I ordered a sleeping bag. I was like, okay, we're gonna camp for a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, which is very surprising in a country like the US, no, which is built on freedom of expression, a
Yeah,
peaceful protest, the way you are describing it, to actually arrest people for protesting because you don't agree, you might not agree with the cause.
yeah,
That's against what the country what the foundations of the country is supposed to be standing for, no?
supposed to be, yeah. And it was also because it was the same day of her hearing. I think she wanted to show that she has a strong reaction to students, because she was literally being grilled by being
The head
questioned.
of the university, I mean.
The head of Minu Shafiq, yeah, the head
Yeah,
of the university.
yeah, I see.
Naama
Yeah.
Shafiq.
Yeah, she Arab, like her name.
She's Egyptian, British, American.
Oh, I see. Interesting combination.
Yeah.
Anyway, when you got arrested, yeah, when were you released after?
I got arrested around 2, and then I was released around 8:30,
Okay.
9ish.
And during,
Or released intermittently.
yeah,
And then there's this thing called jail support. So protesters and legal help, like aid, go and wait for you to be released.
yeah.
So a few like friends were there, and it was really heartwarming to
Nice.
see them.
We had it during the Thawra without having a name for it, no?
Jail support, yeah.
No, but I'm saying people waiting for them, no?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And putting pressure of I'm gonna be
yeah,
here watching you, so you better release them.
yeah, exactly. And
Uh,
during this 6 hour phase, were you scared? They're gonna put you there for a long time. You're gonna get suspended, God forbid, from university. It happened
yeah,
anyway, but like,
yeah. I mean, yeah, I wasn't scared. Like, I wasn't really scared. There's a certain privilege of you're a student, you're gonna be released in a few hours.
so you
It's a
knew that all. It
Yeah,
does,
yeah, we knew it was not a serious, it's not a misdemeanor. It's like a violation. You get a pink ticket. It's a fee, um, and and then they give you a court date. All of that was dismissed
hmm,
later on, by pro bono lawyers who were helping the whole group of students. And I wasn't scared. It was more like being in a setting where I felt, this is such a small. I just thought of a lot of people who are political prisoners.
hmm,
Um, and I remember being in a little cell, and obviously not the same thing, Akid. I'm just saying, like, being in that, sitting on this bed thing, you think of a lot of people who in Palestine, in the Arab world, generally just the prison system, who are stuck in prison and have zero control over their futures or their bodies.
hmm.
And it's a heavy thing to contemplate.
Yeah.
So in that cell, I had thought specifically of people in Palestine who are arrested, and children who are arrested, who don't even know why they're arrested. They don't even get an actual verdict or
Hmm,
cases for a long time. Um, and then a lot of times they force them to sign things out of duress, where they're threatened, or they don't even understand the language and their kids signing this without a lawyer or their parents present. And then I also thought of Ala Abdel Fattah, who's the Egyptian political prisoner who was arrested after the Arab Spring and protests, and then released and then rearrested, who's in
hmm,
jail now. Um, yeah, who I mentioned in my speech later on. Our call for justice comes in a line of brave individuals and communities who have suffered repressive consequences for doing their work and speaking out. Stephen Donziger against Chevron, Tortuguita against Cop City, Ala Abdel Fattah against an authoritarian regime. As climate experts, you now have the tools to change the course of the future, and you have the community to help you do that and back you up. I just thought of him. I was like, we're not in a similar situation, but it was just something. I don't know. I don't like comparing it because it's not the same thing at all, but it
yeah,
was just
we'll get to the speech.
thinking of those people. Yeah.
I'm curious to know the level of support you've received from peers, professors. Like in the speech, I noticed some professors were very like, well, they were clapping, very
Yeah.
proud of you. So like when you were arrested and suspended,
Yeah.
what was the reaction from university people?
From students, it was very supportive. And we've created a really strong group and community of solidarity, even if, let's say, people didn't agree and haven't been going to the protests. A lot of them agreed that it was wrong to arrest students for peacefully protesting. So
Mm,
there was this community aspect, that, yeah, I'm really grateful for. And a lot of them were motivated to continue. So when I couldn't go back on campus, I don't know if I can say that. Like, some of them were at the encampments,
yeah, yeah,
a lot of them were showing up to protest and had been, and then there were new people who showed up. So
yeah.
it was nice to see that movement of solidarity. It's just so clear that this is so messed up. What's happening is so wrong. We're
Mm,
continuing to fund it, and
mm,
we're seeing things every single day that are heartbreaking and just disgusting, and so harrowing to see humanity with what's happening with Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. And so there it is a bit of a this is the least I can do, honestly. Like, it's the least I can do. Yeah, I don't know. And even after the speech, I was like, should I have been sorry. Anyways, I was like, should I have said this and this and this more? And no, it was really the least. And I know a lot of people feel that way. Like, you feel very helpless. So yeah, you're just feeling so helpless for 7 months. And no, really, like, and the community here, students and friends, and it's such a heaviness of I don't know what the hell to do, and I don't know how I can do anything to stop this. So even with the arrest and the suspension, and I know this is a shared thing with so many people, and no, it is the least we can do. And the
No, I
speech also the least that I can do. And of course it helped that I had a nice group of community that supported me, and I felt empowered to speak out, because a lot of my fellow classmates, who even I was nervous because I'm not sure where they agree or don't agree with what I'm saying, were saying like, I can't wait to hear your speech,
yeah,
so
yeah,
and people who don't agree with me, who I know don't agree with me, were like,
yes.
I'm
You're
really actually
curious, yeah.
looking forward to your speech.
Tamara, what advice do you give to young activists, students, now that you've been through this experience?
I think find community is a huge important part of it. Not everybody can go on the streets, especially depending on where you are. Like in Egypt recently, two students disappeared after protesting.
For
And now
Palestine, right?
pro-Palestine protests for the university to divest, they disappeared. We don't know if they're alive or dead. I think the last time I checked. And this is not only specific to Egypt, it's happening all over the Arab world. So some people can protest, some people cannot. And I think finding community is important, because even if you can't, you can at least discuss things and kind of shift this global, like, universal narrative or public thought around these issues. Um, so yeah, yesterday, for example, there was this thing called the People's Graduation for Justice and Freedom. And it was a Columbia graduation, and it was with people like Noura Arakat, Randa Jarrar, Fadi, I forgot his last name, but he's a poet, very powerful poet, and just different. And it was a sheikh, rabbi, and not a priest, but a preacher kind of thing. And it was so powerful. And one of the speakers, نسيت اسمه, but had said something like, "This is such a movement of community, and we have found each other now, and we know that the rest of our life will be with this purpose of like improving the situation, and we have each other to kind of support us." And so yeah, my advice would be find community. Obviously protest and speak out, like things I said in my speech, try to be courageous, but not everybody has that privilege.
Yeah.
And so for those who might not, then find the community to kind of empower you to and support you, and feel like you're not totally alone in your thoughts with this.
How can individuals and institutions better support activists who face legal and academic difficulties, Tamara?
I mean, don't arrest them. That would be a good place.
To start
Or
with,
don't suspend them.
yeah.
Boycott companies and people who do support that. Um, I mean, yeah, I think there is a large support system, which is why this 7 months in is still gaining traction. We saw in the Thawra in Lebanon that it kind of had traction, but COVID didn't help, winter didn't help. It dwindled down from protests of thousands to a few hundred to then a few less than 100. So it's surprising that the protests, at least in the US and I think around the world, have continued throughout these last 7 months, which means it's not something that's going to die down. People are invested, and they feel that this is like a crime against humanity, against our world today. We talk about, this is the only apartheid in the 21st century. And people have had enough. And I think the younger generation, especially, that's exposed to social media, where they're seeing people firsthand report, have خلاص, their eyes are opened. And I think this is a new shift.
What is you're talking about how a lot of people are awakened now about
Yeah.
cause, yeah. What do you think the role is? Is it to try to change the policy of the US? Is it donating to Palestine? Like, what do you think the role is?
I think it's a few things. I think ideally it would be to change the policy of the US. I personally have a more, if maybe extreme, I think it's to change the structure of our global world, how we function and interact with it in a capitalist market. Um, but maybe that's for another episode.
Yeah.
um, and I think it's also, I went to this there was a author, Shuri Day, who works for forensic architecture and works on Israel Palestine, and she was explaining how there's something called the Palestine lens now. Globally we're looking at justice issues. Palestine has shed light on us looking at justice issues generally, liberation generally for all people. So, in Lebanon, when we're talking about Palestine and we're talking about Gaza and the West Bank, how are we what does justice in our own country look like? With Palestinian refugee communities, what does that look like? Generations, they've been here for generations and they're limited to specific careers, low-paying careers. How is that just? It's not. What does justice look like for Syrian refugees who literally might face death, imprisonment, or danger if they're forced to go back? And we're talking about sending them back, and which is against international law, like the Refugee Convention. How is that justice? And I know people will, I know it's people will say, okay, we need to take care of ourselves economically. And I know the situation economically is extremely bad and has been for the last several years. But if we're talking about a human life, like they can lose they're in danger of returning. It is against international law. There is this anti-Syrian rhetoric. And so when we talk about justice, and I love there had been so much support from people. And I wondered, what are your thoughts on this in our own context in Lebanon?
Yeah.
Would you also be calling for a similar thing? Would you be supporting a similar thing? And I don't know if that would be the case.
I think it definitely shed the light about the matter of freedom of expression, the idea of freedom of expression in the West. In the US, yes, but especially in Germany, where if you protest for Palestine, you're considered anti-Semitic.
An anti-Semitic, yeah. But I think people are waking up to that, and they're like, "This is bullshit." Sorry, I don't know if you can beep, but
yeah. No, it's fine. I think
a lot of people at the
protest. I think a lot of people are
protest
waking up, but I think the governments keep them and
yeah, and so it brings us to the question that if you don't have representative governments, they will never give you the space or the freedom. And so we don't in the US, for example, it's a two-party system. And even now I'm seeing this shift in the media narrative of oh, the Republicans are violent towards pro-Palestine protesters. It's a bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans have this in when it comes to Israel. In the Arab world, we don't have governments that represent us. And we saw in Lebanon, we saw all around the region in 2011 and then a bit after. But we don't have governments that represent us. In Jordan, people have been protesting outside the Israeli embassy for months, for so long. And the Jordanian government does not necessarily represent them. Saudi, if you wear a keffiyeh,
it doesn't help.
As long as we have that, it's not freedom of expression or representation or the ability to say something that people might not agree with is not safe. And that obviously varies. In America, it's less risky, obviously, than in places where Egyptian students are forcibly disappeared.
For sure. Tamara, were you there during the Hind's whole incidents when the students occupied the university?
No, so I wasn't there because I was suspended, so I couldn't actually be on campus. But after the arrest, so after they arrested 108 students on the 17th, we didn't know if the protest or the encampment was going to continue. So what happened is the police took over that one, and there's another green lawn next to it, and students moved to the other green lawn. And they weren't allowed to put up tents, so they slept on towels, picnic blankets. And then later on ended up setting up tents. So that was the longer encampment. The first one was on this side for a day and a half, 2 days. And then the other one was for more than 2 weeks, I think. And at some point and during that time in the encampment, there were different teach-ins and just different interfaith community building things. So Mu'taz came to visit the students. I wasn't there because I couldn't enter campus. Norman Finkelstein was there. A lot of different people were there, and it was beautiful. And then at some point they moved to Hind's Hall, which is known as it's Hamilton Hall in Columbia, and that's where historically students have occupied buildings. I think it was in South African apartheid protests and or Vietnam anti-war protests that students at Columbia occupied the Hamilton Hall. So students had occupied it and renamed it Hind Hall after the 6 or 5-year-old who was in the car, who I'm sure we've all heard the audio from, where she was in the car with several of her family members who had been killed, and her cousin had called the ambulance, and there's a recording of her cousin who is screaming and is then killed, her teenager cousin. And then Hind takes up the phone and there's a 3 hour or something conversation between the 6-year-old and the person. And then the 2 paramedics who were so close to arriving were also killed. And they couldn't even retrieve her body 2 weeks until 2 weeks later or something like that, until Israel had left that area. But they renamed it Hind Hall, which I think was so brilliant of them. It was so moving, and Hind's mom, Hind's mom, I don't know if it's Hind or Hind, but Hind's mom and ended up talking about that. And so seeing the efforts by students being recognized by Palestinians is, I think, also a huge motivation of like reminding us, we are feeling this every day, and the Palestinians are feeling this every day, and this is the least we can do. During the takeover with the police, I had been outside campus because I couldn't go inside, and they shut down campus, so nobody could leave or come back. I mean, people maybe could leave, I'm not sure, but I don't think it was safe for them to leave because then they would be identified. But so there were people who were in Hind's Hall occupying it, and then students all around. And what happened was a huge, so many, and I have videos, so much riot police, so many police cars, trucks for blocks, and they had closed the blocks between Columbia. So we had managed to get outside the actual gates on one of the streets, and there were maybe more than 200, 300 people. And then at some point, the police comes in a line with shields and bats and are playing this recording of you're I don't know if it was trespassing or you're obstructing the sidewalk. If you do not disperse, you will be arrested. And it's like, we're literally outside chanting, there is no threat. And it's, you are closing the sidewalk. The road is closed. There's no cars passing.
There is no riot here! There is no riot here! Why are you in riot gear? There is no riot here! There is no riot here!
And then so it freaked people out, but then students started putting the barricades, trying to put different barricades in front of the police. And what they wanted to do was threaten to arrest us, but they wanted to push us so far away from the university that nobody could record what was happening. And so they couldn't be held accountable for their crimes. And so there's a few videos from people inside, and even inside the police had put journalists and medics in a separate building. So student journalists couldn't even report on what was going on. And there was this live broadcast radio reporting that was amazing by students who had not slept for 48 hours covering the siege, but the enclosure of campus.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there was one case where a police had shot a gun in the building, and SJP, the Students for Justice in Palestine, had posted a screen recording of one of the police saying, "Oh my God, I think we shot someone. Like I thought we shot someone."
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
These are students. Many of them, I'm older, but many of them are young, 18, 19-year-olds. Their parents send them. It's probably their first time leaving home, and it's supposed to be taken care of by the university, and then the riot police are called. And and there were injuries, and then one person, there was a video of one person who was pushed down the stairs, like rolled down the stairs. It was really that affected me more than me being arrested peacefully. That was really such a disappointing move from the administration, and then to see the reaction after from the media and the police. Like police, gets trained by the Israeli opposition forces, the IOF, IDF,
Hmm.
and that it was so clear. They released this propaganda video, like, look what we found. These students are so violent. Like, they're like, look at this chain. They used it to lock the doors. You don't get this chain anywhere. It's like a bicycle chain. No, come on.
And some pro-Israeli students attacked the encampments, no, at some point.
That was, I think, in UCLA was the really intense
Oh, I
of,
see. It wasn't,
of
yeah.
that.
It wasn't.
I don't, not that I know of. I know
Okay,
that there
okay. No, no, I
maybe
might have
outside.
confused them. Yes.
But UCLA was insane. Like there's a group, not all students, and CNN recently had a report that they actually weren't students, who came and attacked protesters in the encampment while they were sleeping. They threw a firework in the encampment and then started trying to break the wooden barriers and beat them up. And then you see these crazy videos of these young students, bleeding from their head.
Yeah.
It was, so it's also this whole like narrative of, oh, you're violent. No, and for the most part, for the majority, for the most part, these protests, these encampments have been peaceful.
Yeah.
The response, or perhaps outside where it's non-students, have been violent. The police response is violent. A lot of these students are students of color, and there's a long history of police brutality against people of color. And so for the university to bring them into this campus that's supposed to be a safe space for students was just really, really disappointing.
Yeah.
It was really sad. Like, we were all very affected. It was just left a really bad taste in our mouth.
Like a lot of these protests were attended by Jewish people protesting against Israel, right? This is an experience that you cannot have in Lebanon for whatever reason, for historical reasons. What was it like protesting with Jewish people against the quote unquote the Jewish state?
It was a very diverse range of people who believe in liberation and justice. So yeah, I mean, so there is the talk of, oh, this is anti-Semitic. It's anti-Zionist, but they're not the same thing. And I think a lot of people know that. And there's also this generational kind of, not divide, but there's a bit of a generational split with many young Jews who are kind of having debates with their older generation of parents who, and I don't want to assume all Jews are Zionists. Like, I mean, it's not necessarily the case at all. Protests generally in New York City and the university do have this kind of interfaith aspect to them. And SJ, Students for Justice in Palestine, and Jewish Voice for Peace are both working towards the Palestinian cause and towards justice and liberation, and for the end of apartheid. So it's, I mean, like, the encampment had different religious ceremonies, Shabbat was happening at one point, people were praying, Muslims were praying at another point. So it was a very interfaith space. And then it was also secular. There is people who are just talking about different teachings. Like, somebody had done a teaching on South African apartheid, another had done one on anti-Semitism. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but it was a very interfaith space. And I think generally the fictitious link between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is being broken, and people are realizing they're not the same thing at all. One is a state and a state's policy, and one is like discrimination against the people. So
let's end it with a question. Since you're from Lebanon and you've spent a lot of time here, and you were here during that 2019 revolution, you were, as far as I'm aware, very active during this phase, right? You were in Lebanon, Tamara?
Yeah.
Is there a difference between protesting in Lebanon and protesting in the US, in spite of the fact that you got arrested in the US, not
Yeah.
But if we are being impartial, objective, would you say that the conditions are better in the US than Lebanon?
In the case of where my experience, I would say yeah.
In spite of your arrest.
With part of my arrest, I don't know if, I mean, there were other states that had extreme reactions that would be similar to Lebanon. Like, I remember the protest after the explosion, the police was shooting, ما بتذكر if they were live bullets or rubber bullets,
Yeah, بالanniversary of the protest.
the anniversary.
Yeah. It's the parliamentary.
No, it was a few days after August 4.
Yes. It's the parliamentary guards. They were shooting real bullets.
Real bullets.
Yeah.
You know, so obviously there's more safety. You know, there is a huge difference. People have much more to lose in Lebanon. The situation is much more difficult. It is different.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to lose in Lebanon. The situation for the last several years has been extremely dire economically, politically. Currently, there's an ongoing war with Israel. And you know, a lot of Lebanese who've had to totally move from their homes and migrate, who've lost their lives, journalists who've lost their lives or been injured. So it's not quite the same. There's a lot of like protesting can be a luxury in a sense because of the survival mode that people are in. It is different, but I think I love to see that there were student protests in Lebanon because, you know, AUB is an American school, LAU is an American school. They have endowments, which means we don't. And I don't know about LAU, but AUB is an American. Like they're both American, but AUB doesn't disclose its finances. So there could be like finances linked to Israeli apartheid and occupation. We don't know. So the first step would be to reveal those finances, disclose those finances, like the same thing we're calling for in the US, across schools in the US and across schools in the world, like around the world also. But so it made me really happy to see that. And I understand that there's a bit more to lose and there's also a bit more tension because even though there's a history there in Lebanon, there is tension in the US. There's a lot of anti-Palestine who, like last week, students were protesting outside of a trustee's house. Somebody tried to run them over. You know, there is tension, but in Lebanon,
the civil war
history
history,
there,
yes. And the Palestinians were involved. Yeah, I get the point you are trying to make, but I think people are starting to detach from that history.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Anyway, I fear, but I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Tamara, thank you so much for your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of the day. I guess you're 7-8 hours behind.
You have a good night at
okay. Hopefully, I'll see you soon in Lebanon. It's nice to see that you and Ronnie know each other that much. I didn't know.
Yeah, we know each other from the podcasting world.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, yalla. See you.
Bye. Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. If I may ask all my classmates to stand. Okay. And if you can repeat these words with me. I will be brave. I will be vigilant. I will be curious. I will speak up. I will stand with courage. Thank you. You can sit down. One last note. Sorry, my time is up. One last note. It takes a specific kind of person and intentionality to take on this career and to apply to the climate school, and that's something to be extremely, extremely proud of. So I just want to ask you all to think of your past self. What communities were you hoping to hone and form before coming here? Where did you see yourself after this program? What did you hope to change? Whatever paths we take after today, hold on to that feeling, and let's remind ourselves of what brought us here and how our community at the climate school, students and professors alike, have prepared us to go out into the world as courageous graduates of Columbia University. Congratulations! Mabrur!